But we did well without a good tailback, you know. Had a tough time. General told me during, he said, we need to get a tailback here on this team, have a good team. We had Tom Tracy, didn't we?
Tom Tracy was here in '54. He left, and I'll mention that. He left the first day of practice in spring practice, and Bowden White came in here as our head coach.
54, yeah, that's right. I remember that. Tom Tracy. John came from a little school down in Middle Tennessee. His father was a coach down there. Did a good job for us here. We had a good coach. Bowden White was the coach, and he was a tremendous guy. I think, John, you got all those notes to talk about it. You better get started.
Coach Majors, you want to follow up with some comments about that season?
Yes, I'd be glad to. I was trying to get started to count the players that were seniors when we all compared to the number that came in. We are going to celebrate our 60th reunion on Friday night and Saturday at the ball game. There are 44 signed up. All, of course, are age now from age 78 to 81. I was a senior that year, and I'm 81 now, and I was 21 when I was a senior there. So that's a pretty darn good turnout. And one of my favorites on that team, there was nobody on that team that I didn't like. I consider myself a game player. I mean, I consider myself a team player. Okay, occasionally I talk about myself. I've got a little immodesty, which I get from my mother. And Gus was a great friend of my dad, who was one of the most modest men to be as successful as he was. And I hope my modesty from him. And my dad and Gus had a lot of great stories I could tell you about them at times. But anyway, back to the 56 team. It's our 60th reunion. Roger Urbano was one of our strong ends. And in the single wing of General Neyland's, you had 7 people, of course, on the line of scrimmage. And in the middle of them was a center. You had a strong guard, strong tackle, and a strong end. And over here on the other side, you had to sit in the center, and you had a weak guard, and a weak tackle, and a weak end. And not that they were weak, but we huddled, and they just go straight out if it's right formation. If we went left formation, we serpentine. The end on that side would come out, and the other people would trail right behind him in a serpentine like a snake, and the backs would all run out like this. I was in the middle of the huddle, down on my knee, calling the plays. There was no free substitution in those days. We played both ways, and there was no signal system from the sidelines, and there was no free substitution. I mentioned you could only substitute one player per play. They changed that to 1952 for a little quick thing. Football had always been single platoon, where you played both ways, up until about 1947, after World War II. And Fritz Kreisler was a great coach in Michigan and athletic director, similar to what General Neyland was. He had both jobs here. Kreisler got the rules changed as head of the rules committee and changed it to 2-platoon football, where you had free substitution. You could send 11 out for the other 11. So a lot of people played with an offensive team and a defensive team, and some people played both ways. They were really good double players. But General Neyland took over the job in 1953. That's the year we were recruited, fall of '53. He took it over in '52, and he liked defense most, and Kreisler liked offensive play more. Neyland liked defense and kicking. So he got the rules changed back to single platoon, where you only had one substitute per play, and you could only go in once from the bench, one time a quarter. So sometimes you went down to a third stringer if 2 of the guys got hurt, or one of them got hurt, wanted to come back in the game. You couldn't go back in the second time unless you started the game. In 1952, we were seniors in high school, following our '52 high school senior season. And Tennessee signed 127 players that year in December. teams at that time, particularly down south, signed in December. Later on, they had to sign a national letter, but majority of the time, 90% of the people at the Southern School signed were going to come. So they signed 127 people. They got a little short-handed, they thought. And over 100 of us reported in September 1953. And they just changed to single platoon football, which I always thought was a great asset for me, because in my coaching career, having played both ways and coached on both sides of the line of scrimmage at different times, it helped me prepare for coaching in football. General Nealon, that was General Nealon's last recruiting team, the last recruiting class. He retired in February after we'd signed for ill health, but he had the dual job of athletic director and head coach, and he stayed on for another year, another 10 years as the athletic director, and I got to meet the general. When I was playing, I don't think the general ever spoke to me about call me Majors or John. I'd speak to him every night. He came to the lunch table every day when he was in town, and one down in Florida. And you'd pass him as a big, fine-looking, handsome man. He had a big chest and a big belly on him later on. Very handsome man all his life. And I said, "Hello, General," or I'd just say, "Hello." He said, just keep right on going. Well, he finally learned my name when I started coaching him. He knew my name, I found out later on. But I got to know the general very well when I started coaching here, and that's another story for another day, I suppose, if you're interested. Nice recruiting class. And we reported, we lived in old East Stadium Hall, and we ate underneath there in the stadium. And I found out later that I wasn't the only person scared before our first scrimmage and dreaded the first scrimmage. I talked to some of the tackles we had, and the biggest guy we had on our team was John Gordy, as a senior. He was captain, I was alternate captain. He weighed 218 pounds, the heaviest guy on our squad. I weighed 168. I got up that high in my senior year. And General Nealon turned the team over to Harvey Robinson, who was a very intelligent, smart coach who had played for the general when Bobby Dodd was playing here in the late 20s and early 30s. And Harvey Robinson had coached the offensive backs and was kind of an offensive coordinator, and he became the head coach, and all the other General Nealon staff members stayed and coached us as freshmen and sophomores. Coach Robinson continued to coach the tailbacks and the punters, and was head coach. It was a tough transition, because there was some competition that wanted to get the job when the general retired. And I won't mention names because they were very good to me, and I respected the ones that were in contesting for the job. But Robinson got it. Everybody else was retained, and they added a person named John Idzik to be the B team coach or the T team coach. Tennessee was one of the only 3 teams in the country that used the single wing offense: Princeton, Tennessee, UCLA. So we called our B team, which is a substitute, we called them the T team, because we never faced another single wing team the whole time we were here. Harvey Robinson was a very bright man, but he was caught in a tough situation. And the first year of his career, 53, our freshman year, we were 6-4-1. The next year, 54, was 4-6, and General Nealon released them. That means the other coaches were free to go do what they wanted to, because they weren't assured they were going to be retained. Fortunately, they hired one of the greatest coaches of all time to take Coach Robinson's place. He came in here in December of 1954, and therefore coached our 55 team in the spring of 55 and also in the fall of 55. Bowden White and Bobby Dodd, who played for Nealon, both of them played for Nealon. They are 2 of the 3 coaches in college football history who are in the Hall of Fame, both as a football coach and as a player. And first, when General was coaching, and Robinson, my first 2 years, who had some U.S. Army, what do you call it? They don't need it, so they set it. That's what do they call it?
Surplus.
Surplus?
Yeah, surplus. Oh, boy, that's a big word. I can't get that. these big old gray buses that were surplus military buses, kept them parked underneath the south end of the stadium, they took the tires off, put them up on jacks, and in football practice time, they'd get them out, put new tires on them, and they'd shove the players up to Upper Hudson Field. I call that Upper Hudson, I always will. Upper Hudson and Lower Hudson, that's where they play now. That's Upper Hudson Field. And we'd take time about. They'd take the B-teamers out first, when we had to go out there and get ready for the varsity to beat us up. So freshmen were not eligible at that time. Only you had to play a freshman schedule and practice against the hard varsity players every day. The first day, Coach White was our head coach. He's one of the most handsome men I've ever known. 6'1", and he had chances to go to Hollywood after he graduated at 39, and he decided to stay in coaching. But he was a handsome man, a dynamic and a great leader. He was tough, disciplined. He lathered everybody down. There were no fat players on our team. They put them on a fat table. That meant they had to eat lesser food than the rest of us did. They didn't eat a lot of potatoes. Cut them off that. So we were all trim and we were in condition. We could run all day and all night. Bowden White was something else. First day of practice, he came in and told the players who were sitting around waiting on the buses. They said, "Okay, fellas, the buses, all the tires got blown up on the buses. Hit the railroad track." So you roll right out of East Stadium and go down through the South Stadium. Railroad tracks run right up to Upper Hudson and Lower Hudson. So we all would walk up or jog up, and after the practice, quite often, he would tell you, whether sprint or run sprint, everybody hit the tracks and run back to the locker room. I'll meet you in there for a meeting. So he said they're all broken. And the first scrimmage, I was a sophomore, but I was an upcoming junior, of course. The first scrimmage we had on Upper Hudson Field, I was running number one tailback, Tom Tracy, one of the greatest athletes that's ever been on this campus, was running number one fullback. He was going to be a senior. Well, we'd go down 3 or 4 times back and forth, and when we get to the end of the field, Coach White would say, "Riverside." Well, they used to have a field down the river, and I got that name, and Riverside. The general had he called that when they get to the river. When he said Riverside, that meant turn around, we're going to go back the other way. Coach White used that, and I used that every day of my life at the scrimmage, Riverside, to turn around. My dad also used it as well. But we were scrimmaging, been up and down about 5 or 6 times, and a lot of people's thumbs are hanging out. Tom Tracy had one of the greatest physiques you've ever seen, a great athlete. He could do the trampoline, high diving, but he was a great broken field runner. Weighed about 205 pounds and had great speed. We were side by side. Tom has a leg cramp, which he had the year before. Mickey O'Brien would run out there real quick, the trainer, and try to check him out, you know. Well, he had a leg cramp as we're coming back up the field this way from the river. Had a leg cramp. Coach White just stepped over him, said, "Give me another fullback." Tracy didn't like it. He'd been spoiled somewhat, but he was a great athlete and tough. He was a wonderful player. Well, that evening, Tom Tracy said he's going to quit. We kept scrimmaging, we're going to quit. And when he got back in the locker room, came back in from being treated for his injury, Coach Skeeter Bailey, who was a he was a tackle coach, and one other coach, Leroy Pierce, who played for a while at Wyoming and Arkansas, they had his bags all packed, his clothes in cardboard boxes, and that gave him a hint. So he left that night with his bags already packed by 2 coaches. They weren't going to put up with it. So they turned us around overnight. We lost the first 2 games in 55. This is a 56 team. Now we're in the spring practice of our junior years, upcoming junior years. And he turned us around. We lost the first 2 games our junior year. Lost to Mississippi State 13-7 and Duke 20-0, both out here in Knoxville. We never lost another game the next 2 games except the Kentucky game next to last. Kentucky beat us 22-0 badly up there, but we were on the move. We were beating people pretty good at mid-season. We would get more confident every day and every week. So that led us into the 56 team. We were offered a bowl bid with a 6-3-1 record, the Gator Bowl. We were offered. We made a great We had a great game against Vanderbilt. The last game here, Vanderbilt was going to the Sugar Bowl if they beat us. But we hate Vanderbilt, they hate us. We beat them 20-14. We couldn't move the ball. They shut us down. We completed 3 touchdown passes, beat them 20-14, knocked them out of the Gator Bowl. The Gator Bowl offered us the bid to play Auburn. We wanted to go in the worst way. We were dying to go to a bowl game. And Coach White turned it down. Well, we're not going to contest him, or question him at all, because we were going to play Auburn the opening game the next year, which we hadn't played in 29 years. 19 years, since 1939, hadn't played it. And we used the single wing. They hadn't seen the single wing since after World War II. So he turned it down. Fortunately, the next year we opened up at Birmingham against Auburn, beating them 35-7. We were disappointed, but it paid off for us because Coach White made the decisions, and naturally he was smarter than we were. Lost the first 2 games, and we moved on from there. A key game was Georgia Tech here at home in '55. We tied 7-7. They won the conference that year and beat Pittsburgh in the Sugar Bowl, I believe, 14-7. 7-7 tie, and a little quick story about General Newland and me. I played the full 60 minutes in that game. Buddy Cruz and I and Lonnie Hersman are probably the 3 last people that have ever played 60 minutes of football for Tennessee. And they came in the same year I did. Buddy finished with me, was a great All-American end. Lonnie Hersman was redshirted. He had another extra year left. But the Georgia Tech game, I didn't leave the game, played both ways, 7-7 tie. They won the championship. I told you, won the bowl game. After the game, I came out of the shower. I weighed 162 pounds my junior year. Came out of the shower, and General Needham was standing in the locker room there. He always wore a suit, double-breasted suit, and said, "Majors, get on the scales." Well, we had these big faces, big face of the scale that showed the poundage, and you had a square thing you stood on. So you got on, and when I was a recruit up here for the Kentucky game in 1952 fall, 14-14 tie, that's the first time we met the general. I'd been up to the Alabama game, but we didn't meet, my dad and I didn't meet him, but we weren't spoiled. We didn't think we had to meet the general, the head coach. We wanted a scholarship. I had a lot of scholarship offers, but nonetheless, I'd forgotten this till my brother Joe reminded me of it. When I came out of Farmer Johnson, who recruited me to play for Neyland's first 2 teams, and he brought me back to meet the general in the old East Stadium dining room. The general ate back in the kitchen where the head man and the other people were cooking. He had a little table there, a little foam, and he had his own. He didn't eat with the troops, so to speak. So we went back, and Farmer Johnson introduced my dad, the general, and I weighed about 150, but I said I weighed 155. The general says, "Majors, what do you weigh?" He said, "What do you weigh?" Or John, whatever you call me. And before I could say 155, sir, Farmer Johnson, the coach, beat me to it. He says, 175, General. That's 25 pounds less than I weighed. So 3 years later, after the Georgia Tech game in early November, I came out of a shower. General Neyland, after playing 60 minutes, General Neyland said, "Get on the scales, Majors." He said, 147. I knew Farmer was lying to me. I didn't even know he even knew who I was back at that time. I remembered me. That's how smart he was. So we started off great. In 57, we won them all, of course, and we won by large scores. To give you a quick example, 1956, we beat Auburn 35-7 the first game at Birmingham, beat Duke 33-20 the second game at Durham, beat Chattanooga 42-20, Alabama 20-0, Maryland 34-7, North Carolina 20-0. Then there's Georgia Tech 6-0, Mississippi 27-7, Kentucky 27, and Vanderbilt 27-7.